Hello, and welcome to this training session for Tungsten Automation Power PDF. Power PDF is our PDF viewer, editor, converter, creator utility. There are a few different components that make up the solution. The primary one is the user interface I have on the screen now. This is where you go if you want to interact with any PDF document. In addition to this, we also offer integration into the Microsoft Office suite of tools. So if you're in Word, Outlook, PowerPoint, or Excel, there'll be a PDF tab available that's going to allow you to do bidirectional conversion of PDF documents. So you can either take the open Word document in this case and create a PDF from it, or open a PDF as a Word document, and we take care of the conversion for you in the background. There are a number of options allowing you to control how things like bookmarks, links, and comments are carried over from one format to another. We also introduce here the concept of a PDF profile. Whenever you're creating a PDF document, regardless if it's through the Office integration, the primary user interface, or the print driver, which I'll cover in a moment, you get to choose one of these profiles that dials in the specific settings around what that output PDF document will look like. We ship with a number of options out of the box, but you do have the ability to edit these if you want to customize any of these settings. This lets you dial in the PDF compatibility level, how fonts are handled, compression, security, watermark, and a few other settings. In addition to our Office integration, we also provide a PDF print driver. So if you need to generate PDFs from any other line of business application, you can simply File, Print, and choose this Power PDF printer. If you go into the print properties, you'll once again see an option to specify the profile to ensure you're creating the same type of PDF output. Jumping back to the primary user interface, I'll give you a quick orientation here. The first thing that users typically notice when they start working with Power PDF is that it looks very similar to Microsoft Word. We've adopted the same ribbon style of interface, where there is a ribbon of buttons across the top that gets divided into a number of different tabs that group together common functionality. The big advantage here is it's very easy to start working with Power PDF, since most users are used to working with this style of user interface. In addition to the ribbon, we also have our panels down along the left side, and these are used whenever you need a separate UI in order to interact with the document. So for example, if we wanted to apply a stamp to the document, we can open up the Stamps panel. This will open up the panel and show us all of the available stamps on the left, and we can simply drag and drop one of those onto the document wherever we'd like. There are additional panels for things like comments, attachments, watermarks, security. If you right-click over here, it brings up a menu where you can turn on or off different panels, so you can customize the UI to be just the way you need. Speaking of UI customization, we also have a quick access toolbar. You'll notice it's this blue bar across the top. I will mention that by default, this does appear up top, right above the ribbon. But if you use it, I usually recommend dropping it down to the bottom here by clicking this down arrow and indicating whether you want it above or below the ribbon. This quick access toolbar is going to allow you to take any functionality from Power PDF and put a hotkey for it directly on this toolbar. So for example, if you're doing a lot of redaction, we could come into here, select more commands, locate our redaction command, and then add that to our quick access toolbar. All of the buttons on this quick access toolbar do have hotkeys. So if I press the Alt button, it brings up all of the hotkeys available inside the application. And you'll notice that this quick access toolbar is labeled 1 through 6 currently. If we added a 7th button there, you could access it simply by pressing the Alt 7 button, so your hands never have to leave the keyboard. Down at the bottom of the screen, we have our view control. So if you're dealing with a multi-page document, you can either jump to a specific page inside of it, or you can step through it one page at a time using the arrow keys here. There's also a slider to control the zoom level, so we can zoom in or out based on our preference. You can also zoom using the control button and the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. In the upper right-hand corner, there is a search bar labeled Find a Tool. This is very useful as you're starting to get used to working with Power PDF, and you haven't learned where all of the buttons live inside the user interface. Rather than having to hunt through the different menus to find the functionality you're looking for, instead you can just type what you're trying to do in the search bar. For example, if we wanted to perform some redaction on this document, we could simply type redact, and it will bring up all of the buttons associated with redaction that we can click on directly from this search bar. If you want a little bit more information about how to perform a workflow, we also have excellent online documentation. So if I go to Help, Power PDF Help, this will pop open a web browser with our documentation loaded, and this also has search functionality. So if I wanted to know a little bit more about that redaction workflow, I could type redact, and it'll bring up the help topics associated with redaction. I can click on one of these for step-by-step instructions on how to perform redaction. So anything you're looking to do, I generally recommend this documentation being your first stop. Now that you're oriented to the user interface, I'm now going to step through the various tabs here just to highlight the most commonly used functionality. And I am going to start on the Home tab with this Document Assembly button. When I select this button, it brings up an alternate view of the document. You can see we're somewhat zoomed out so we can see the different pages. I will mention that this view does support zooming, so if we wanted to see the pages in more detail, we could zoom in further. From here, I can perform any page level manipulation of this document. When I say that, I mean that essentially anything you can do with a stack of pages in your hands, you can likely do using this view. For example, if I wanted to reorder these pages, I could simply click on a page and drag and drop it to a different location inside the document. Alternatively, perhaps I want to take these first two pages and create a separate document containing just them. To do that, I would hold down the Control button to select those two pages. I can then right-click to bring up a context menu and select the Extract option. This will prompt me to see if I want to delete those pages after I perform the extraction, which I will not do at the moment. It will then open up a new tab containing a document with just those two pages. I will mention here our tabbed document viewing. So if you have multiple documents open inside Power PDF, they appear as separate tabs here. This is an option you can configure. So if you prefer separate windows, you can certainly enable that instead. Jumping back to our page assembly, you'll notice on our context menu, there are also options to add new pages, insert, rotate, delete, replace, crop, and a few other page manipulation options. As far as combining documents, we give you a couple of different options. The first is available in this page assembly button, and this is useful for page level combination of documents. So if I have a second document that I want to add a single page from, I can select that document and then simply drag pages from one document to another. Alternatively, if I'm looking to combine multiple documents together into a single output, maybe I have 5 single-page PDFs and I want to create one 5-page PDF, I can do that by going back to my Home menu and selecting the Combine Files button. From here, I can select 2 or more documents that I want to combine. One thing to note here is that these documents don't just have to be PDFs. They could be Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, scanned TIFF images. We will take care of converting those all to PDF before creating that final output. You'll also notice here, once again, we have a profile selection to ensure that the PDFs you create are the same standard that you're using elsewhere. Moving on here, there are also buttons in the UI to create a Word, Excel, PowerPoint file from the open PDF document. So you have a couple of different ways to approach this. If we're natively working in Word, we can convert files back and forth there. Alternatively, if we're working inside Power PDF on a PDF document, we can do the conversion directly from the search bar here. The next feature I want to highlight is the ability to make PDFs searchable. This is useful for whenever you deal with those scanned or faxed in PDF documents that contain pictures of text rather than text itself. And if you now need to work with that text layer to search it, copy it, highlight it, edit it, you first need to make that document searchable. You can do that by selecting this Make PDF Searchable button. And I want to mention here that we have two different modes when creating searchable PDF documents. The first will preserve the original image in the foreground, and in the background, we will insert an invisible text layer. This is useful because it preserves the original look and feel of the document. However, the downside is that you can't make any changes to the text since it's just a picture that you're looking at. So very useful for searching or copying text. But if you need to edit the contents of the document, you need to replace the image with the text counterparts. This option is available by going into the settings here, and there is a checkbox indicating whether you want to keep those original images or to discard them and replace them with their text counterparts. In this case, I am not going to keep those original images, and you'll see when I perform this workflow, it's going to replace this page with text, and some of these image imperfections, like the hole punches up top, will disappear. Once that operation completes, we also pop open a spell checker to validate that we did everything correctly. So you have the opportunity to make any corrections you need at this point. Now that we've finished that workflow, we have an editable PDF, which brings us to the next button, Edit Text. So if I wanted to change any of the contents of this document, I can do so by selecting the Edit Text button and then simply placing my cursor where I want to make the change. And in this case, changing it from December 8th to December 9th. You'll notice when we go into our edit text mode that the toolbar changes, and we bring up typical text editing controls so you can modify things like the font, size, color, and spacing. Alternatively, if we're dealing with an image-based document, such as this one here that we extracted earlier, I can still add text to the document. However, I can't change the existing text that's inside of it. If I want to add a text on top of it, I would use our Typewriter tool. And then once again, I can place my cursor wherever I'd like and add some text. Once again, we have our text editing controls to change things like the font and size. Moving on, the next tab I'll talk about is the Edit tab. You'll see once again, we have the Edit Text and the Typewriter tools. We now also add the Edit Object button. This is used if we want to manipulate any graphical content inside of a PDF document. So we have this picture of an airplane, and if I select Edit Object, I can grab that picture, move it around, resize it, and a few other basic image manipulation options. Also on the Edit tab is our ability to add headers and footers to a document. This is useful if you want to do things like adding page numbering. So if I select this dialog, I can go to Add, and this will allow me to indicate where I want to add a header or footer. And we also have some predetermined macros. So if we wanted to add page numbering, a date stamp, an author stamp, these are all available in this dropdown. We can select one of them, indicate our location, and insert that macro. And then once again, you have font controls to change the font face and size. If you need to add consistent numbering across a whole set of documents, that's available by going to Bates Numbering. Here, we would select multiple documents that we want to add consistent page numbering to. And inside this output dialog, we can set up the prefixes and suffixes we want to add to that set of documents. We also have some options available here to add some interactive elements to the document. So we can add things like hyperlinks, movies, sounds, or 3D objects. Moving on to our Comments tab, this is where we have access to our annotation capabilities. This is very useful when you are collaborating on a document. So perhaps I want to call attention to the date. I could choose to highlight that information. And then I may indicate that I also want a call out, asking someone to please check date. All of our comments get summarized on the comments panel over on the left. So you can see all of the comments that are added to the document. And if you click on them, it'll jump you to that location. You can also see the author as well as a date timestamp when that comment was created. From here, you also have the ability to reply to the comment, maybe indicate that this is incorrect. You can also right-click to set a status. So in this case, I might reject this comment. It's important to note that all of these comments occur on a separate layer of the PDF document, so that if you wanted to, you can simply come in and remove all of them by just highlighting them and deleting them, so we have a clean original document once again. In addition to the highlights and the callouts I mentioned, we also support sticky notes, text boxes, some spell checking tools, as well as a number of free drawing options. Moving on to our advanced processing tab, the first feature I'll mention here is our ability to flatten files. This is useful if you are applying stamps or markups to a document and you don't want them at least easily removed after you've applied them. In order to prevent that, you can choose to flatten the file, which will burn in any of those annotations. This is especially important if you're doing things like adding signature stamps and you want to make sure that that stamp stays on the document. We also have an option here to reduce or optimize a PDF document. That's going to allow you to compress a PDF in case you need to minimize the document size for transport across a network. So there are some general settings here. And if we go to the Images tab, you can control the compression we're going to use on different color depth images. The next feature I'll mention on the Advanced Processing tab is our ability to compare multiple documents. So I can access that by choosing Compare here, and then selecting two different versions of a document I want for comparison. I'll choose one there, and then I'll choose a modified version. I then have an option around what types of differences I'm looking for. These can either be text-based or visual. Generally, I recommend sticking with the text-based differences so there aren't that many false positives, especially when dealing with scanned documents. You also have an option as far as what type of output report you want. This can either be side by side, where we get to see both documents next to each other, or a combined report where we'll see a single output document that's marked up with all of the changes that were identified. In this case, I'll choose a side-by-side comparison, and then this is going to give me a report of all of the differences we were able to locate. And if I scroll down, I can see a side-by-side comparison with highlighting of all the changes that were detected inside the document. The next feature I'll mention is some of our automation capabilities. And this is available under advanced processing using our sequencer. So if you have a common workflow that you're performing again and again to documents, and you want to save yourself some mouse clicks, you can set up a sequence by choosing this button here and selecting a new sequence. So we will call this the watermark test sequence. I can then select a series of commands that I want to perform to the document. And you can see all of the ones that are available over on the left here. In this case, we are going to add a watermark. And if I double click on this, I get to choose what type of watermark and any additional properties associated with that. Once I'm happy with my selection, I can save my sequence. And now I can either perform that to a batch of existing documents using the batch converter tool here, or if I have an ongoing workflow, I can use a watched folder where I will monitor an input folder for new documents. And whenever a new document appears in that input folder, we will, in this case, automatically convert it to a searchable PDF by performing that OCR workflow we mentioned, as well as performing our sequence to apply a watermark to the document. Once that's all done, we will place the results into an output folder. So this is a great time saver, one, because it saves you the effort of clicking through to add a watermark in this case, and two, because we are creating a searchable PDF, we're automatically performing that OCR workflow in the background, and that can be a little bit time consuming sometimes several seconds per page. So if you're dealing with a multi-hundred page document, that could be a significant chunk of time that you're saving using this watched folder. The next tab I'll talk about is the security tab. This is where you go if you want to perform any type of redaction. So if I needed to remove some sensitive information from this document, I can choose to mark text for redaction. And in this case, I'll select William's name. When I've selected that information, you'll notice the red rectangle around the text, and that's indicating the text that will get redacted. If we hover over that with our cursor, we get a preview of what that redaction will look like once it's applied. It's important to note that this is true redaction. We will be permanently burning in that rectangle, as well as scrubbing the searchable text that appears underneath it. If you right-click, you can access the redaction properties. This is going to allow you to do things like change the redaction color or specify some overlay text if we want to indicate the type of content that is being redacted here. I can either enter that manually or select one of the pre-populated redaction codes. Redaction is a two-step process. The first thing you do is mark the document up for redaction. And once you are finished marking it up, you would then apply those redactions, and that will permanently burn in those annotation or those black rectangles, scrub the searchable text, and we will also prompt you to remove additional metadata from the document to ensure that we are not accidentally leaking sensitive information inside of a bookmark or a comment or any other annotation. The next feature on the security tab is our signature capability. We have a few different types of signature that we support inside Power PDF. The first is what we call a sign and mark workflow. And this is very similar to Adobe's fill and sign, where you have some controls to do basic form filling out. So if I had a form like this, there are some controls here that are going to let me do things like check off checkboxes, add text to do things like enter my last name in this case, or perform or add a signature stamp to the document. For signature stamps, you would first define your signature by going into Manage Signatures. This will pop open your signature library. And if you needed to add a new signature, you can choose the plus button, either draw your signature with your cursor or import an existing image of your signature. That will then get saved to your signature library. And the next time you need to sign a document, you would simply select handwritten signature and indicate where you'd like to place that. I do recommend that after you use the sign and mark technology, you would then flatten the PDF to make sure none of that content is at least easily removed by whoever receives this form. So this is a very quick, easy way for what I'll call low security signature applications. If you need a little bit stronger type of signature, we do also support certificate-based signatures, and those are available through Security, Sign, Sign Document. Once again, I will indicate the area where I want to apply my signature, but now I will get prompted to select a digital certificate I want to use to authenticate myself. So with a digital certificate, because we're using a certificate, this is tying back to who we are. So we are who we claim to be. And it's also sealing the document to make sure that changes can't be made to it after we've applied our signature to it. We, by default, have a standard appearance. However, you do have the ability to customize this to control what details are provided inside of it, and also to change any of the graphics. So if you wanted to have a picture of your signature in here, you could. The final type of signature we support is signature orchestration. Directly inside Power PDF, we have integration with DocuSign that's available in this button up here, as well as our own SignDoc technology. If you're using any other signature orchestration provider, such as Adobe Sign, that Power PDF does still support working with those workflows. However, you will need to use a web browser in order to interact with those services. The final thing I'll talk about in the security tab is our ability to manage the security on a PDF document. So currently, this document does not have any security. If I wanted to change that, I could choose Manage Security and Modify. This gives us a quick summary indicating no security and that everything is allowed. If I wanted to secure the document, I could choose Password Security. I then have two different options. One is that I could encrypt the entire document so that no one could open it unless they have a password. And that's this top section here where I would create an open password, and that will encrypt the document with the encryption algorithm of my choosing up here. Alternatively, if I have a form that I want people to view and fill out, but not change, I can restrict the access to the document using this permission section down bottom. In this case, I would supply a owner password. Anyone with that password would have full control over the document, and anyone without that password would still be able to open the document, but you could restrict their permissions using the drop-down menus down here. So in our case, I might want people to fill out form fields and sign signature fields, but not make any changes to the contents of the document. So either way you want to secure your document is very well supported using the Manage Security option. The final tab I'll talk about is the Forms tab. And this is where you go if you want to create a fillable PDF document. So if you have a form that you want to collect information on, something similar to what I'm displaying on the screen now, and you can't guarantee that the recipient has a PDF editor, what you can do is create a fillable PDF by going to our Forms tab and choosing the text field tool. I can then draw a rectangle where I want a user to enter their information and then label this text box, in this case, as the name. Now, anyone that receives this document, even if they just have a free PDF viewer, would still be able to enter their information into these form fields. Typically, the big downside to creating fillable PDFs is that it's a little bit tedious to draw all of these boxes on the screen, label them, and make sure that they are nicely aligned to both the content of the document as well as the other fillable elements. Thankfully, we have a nice tool called the Form Typer that's available in this button up here. And this is going to use some computer vision algorithms to automatically analyze the page and figure out where a user would typically interact with it. So with that one button click, we've gone ahead and created roughly 30 different fillable elements. We've also labeled them based on the surrounding content. So you can see the box for the email address is labeled email address because that's the prompt we found immediately to the left of it. This is a very quick, easy way to create professional looking fillable PDF forms. I will mention we do have some advanced capabilities when dealing with fillable PDFs. So if you wanted to have things like calculated fields or any type of form automation, such as automatic submission, if you right-click any fillable element and bring up the properties, you have the option to have calculated fields on the Calculate tab here. And you can see we have a number of pre-configured options or the ability to write your own calculation script. There's also the Actions button here. So if we wanted to have automation based off of button clicks, we could select a trigger and then an action to perform. This could be things like submitting a form or running your own JavaScript. So most basic form automation capabilities are very well supported inside Power PDF. The final tab here I'll talk just briefly about is the Connectors tab. This may or may not be available to you based on how you've done your deployment. But if there's any integrations with third-party document management systems, such as your SharePoint server, those buttons would be available in this Connectors tab. And this will let you do things like open documents from a document management system, save them, check them in, check them out, and manage document metadata. And that concludes the training session for Tungsten Automation's Power PDF. Thank you.